Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be with you this morning. This looks like being a really super conference. My job is to change your perspective, and to do that, I'm going to inject some contention. So let me give you a prequel. 100 megabits is not enough. Fiber to the home is not the complete solution. The world is not asymmetric. I'm going to do this by giving you some perspectives of the past, the present, the future, and a glimpse of what is just over the horizon. This debate about do we need fiber to the home has been going on for a long time. It's been going on for over 30 years. It is the most debated topic in the whole of the telecommunications industry history and possibly of the whole human race. Let's just address what we know for sure. There are no silver bullets. There are no magic solutions. There are no killer apps. No one topology or one technology will solve this problem. And there are absolutely no mysteries. We know absolutely all there is that we need to know about optical fiber, devices, networks, how to build them and what to do with them. And we know how to make the right choices, country or city at a time. Decades of operational experience with fiber in long lines networks have given us 20/20 vision. We've learnt an awful lot. And I'm going to put it to you that the economic models that are used for fiber to the home are wrong. And I don't mean they're wrong in a small way, I mean they're wrong in a big way. And if we could just get people to think about the situation, about the problem in the round, we would get a good solution. So let's just have a look at some facts. Long lines, fiber, changed telecommunication and the habits of the human race. Without it, we would have no internet. We would have no mobile networks. It reduced the manpower required to run a network by over 80%. It reduced faults by over 99%. It increased capacity by over 1 million times. The list is endless. Fiber in the local loop, fiber to the home, was first viable in 1984. It was economically viable in 1986. It was in manufacture by 1990, and in the UK it was being rolled out by 1991. We'd actually built factories manufacturing the components and the systems, but a government decision stopped that rollout. However, our friends in Japan and Korea carried on. The rest, as they say, is history. So what's on offer? If we start with a clean sheet of paper rather than a history that goes back over 100 years for telcos, we see that we can reduce switch sites by 90%. In the UK, that would have meant getting rid of over 7,000 buildings, staff reductions of over 70%, fault reductions of over 90%, reduced truck rolls of over 95%. All the rest you know. It's just so blindingly obvious. People talk about making an economic case. Very simple. How about the investment? In 1992, to put fiber into any EU telco required about 3 to 5 years of profits. A trivial problem. And yet, we had all the debate, all the discussion. What went wrong? Biggest problem, the mindset, the vested interest, the history. And worst of all, the limited thinking, people who just didn't get it. The thing that I found most amusing were these dumb questions people would ask. What would anyone want 64 kilobits per second for? You can remember all of these. What are people going to do with 10 megabits? Imagine if you went to buy a car and it said to you, what do you want to drive at 20 kilometers an hour for? 100. And worst of all, what are you going to use the car for? And then there's a sales pitch that says it actually does 100 kilometers to the litre, and in the small print it says, depends on driving conditions, you've got to be going downhill with a strong wind behind you. That's how the telcos and the industry actually sells broadband. No wonder people are a little bit tense and a bit fed up and wondering what is happening. It's like an industry suddenly decided to ignore the customers, ignore all the trend analysis, all the demands, and worst of all, they've not looked at the next industrial revolution. They've not looked slightly over the horizon at what is going to happen. So I'm going to give you the big picture first, the way I see things. And by the way, this slide set is going to be available for you to download. There's a video being made, so you'll be able to watch it. And I'm going to be here for the entire conference, and I will meet with any of you if you want to discuss afterwards. Sustainability cannot be realized with the old technologies and the old ways of doing things. We have to change radically what we do. We're not going to cure this problem by changing all the light bulbs. We're really not. We have actually got to stop doing some of this stuff in the way that we do it. It is just so unbelievably wasteful of energy and resources. And yet, we have video conferencing over there somewhere not being used. Why? The telecommunications industry has still not got something that Hollywood understood on day one. The most important bits are the emotional bits. They throw those bits away and give us second-rate pictures and second-rate sound. And until we get high-definition pictures and high-quality sound, we're not going to use video conferencing as effectively as we could. Home and remote working has changed lots of lives. In the UK now, about 30% of the working population are engaged in doing this in some way. But there is widespread, really widespread frustration. I wanted to send the organizers of this conference a mere 340 megabytes of information, and I couldn't send it to them. There was no way of doing it, not even when I compressed it. And you think, not very good. Worst of all, the lack of bandwidth undermines some of the biggest changes our society is going to see. Everywhere you go, you can see populations getting old, you can see healthcare systems creaking, and we're not teleporting medical expertise around the planet to the point of need. We're shipping people, and people are not getting the treatments that they actually require. This one is frustrating an industry. Television sets are now arriving in people's homes, they plug them into the internet, and they can't do anything. Less than 7% of new television sets that are internet ready can't be used on the internet. I collected these statistics as I roamed the planet over the last 12 months. You can see where I want to live. I have very nearly 100 megabits there on Wi-Fi. The global average is less than 10 megabits. If you look at the bottom line, it is very close to 250 or 500 kilobits. And notice the asymmetry. How absurd. Why is there asymmetry? Because of the crosstalk limitations of copper wire. That's how it came about, not for any rational reason or decision. It was what the telcos could do. It's not an asymmetric world. A lot of us want to upload more than we download. Some people download more than they upload, but increasingly it will become more and more symmetrical. So I'm going to put it to you that bandwidth and connectivity present the ultimate roadblock to the progress of the human race. If we don't do something, we are going to stall. So our future and that of this planet lies inextricably bound to new technologies, models for industry and society. I've only got time to illustrate this with a few examples, which I'm now going to do. Here's the most exciting place to go. If I could be reborn and I could be a student, this is the point I would go for. Not for electronics, not for telecommunications. I'd go for the intercept of nano, bio, IT, and artificial intelligence. That is where the next industrial revolution is coming from, and it's where the big change is going to originate. Already in industry, we have people printing gearboxes, printing spanners. They've printed the first automobile. And the big problems center around it, getting it cost effective on a mass scale. But already people like HP and Epson are looking at making units that will go into our homes that will allow us to do 3D printing. And the enthusiasts that we now see working in this area parallel my generation getting into electronics at a very young age. At the bottom is the world's first printed automobile, entirely plastic. On top, metal is being drawn, so it's not just we're limited to plastics. And people like BMW are looking at this in terms of future generations of automobile, and could we, in that plastic, embed the battery? And could we program the color of the car? And if we tap that car and put a dent in the bodywork, could we actually get it to remold itself in real time? Perhaps. So I'm going to put it to you that we're on a trajectory that looks like this. It's about open software, networks access, and open hardware. That is going to change development, distribution, innovation. There is now a parallel track, and it's in the area of biology, and it's about the programming of materials. We don't know how stem cells work, but we find that we can use them to rebuild tissue, muscles, organs, but also materials like clothing, cloth. Unusual way of making things, but imagine, we as a species have come top down from bulk materials, and we've gone right now down into the depth of the atom. Mother Nature came up from below and created from atoms, molecules, and then living creatures, life, and ecological systems. This is a nano sensor, the most sensitive instrument that we have. It can detect a single molecule of a substance. This is going to appear on your doctor's desk. He's going to diagnose your problem, not in 2 weeks' time when a sample has been to the laboratory and the results have come back, but within 10 minutes of you going through his door. A genetic analysis of your body is now possible in 4 hours. It costs less than $1,000. The target is 10 minutes, $10. Last year, I did 3 things in 1 week that were staggering to me. 1, I stood on top of a nuclear reactor. 2, I was dragged across the floor holding a chain, being attracted to a supermagnet, and I picked up an atom and moved it from one place to another, and I never thought I would ever do that. Best of all, we now have our machines designing machines. You may or may not be aware, but that laptop, that pad, that mobile phone you have, the chips are no longer designed by a human being. There's an artificial intelligence component because the complexity is way beyond human ability. This walker, planetary walker by NASA, is now being built physically by engineers following the design originated by an artificial intelligence system. That reprogrammable, change-shaping robot below is an experiment in rather large molecular design. This is part magic, it's part Hollywood, but it's out of Intel, and it's kind of an interesting concept. supposing you could just get material and mold it. It partly works. It's not quite there yet, but it sure is a glimpse of where the technology is going. I'm going to put the sound up on this for you. If I could just have the sound up, please.
Children's book titles, My Michelle, MC5, and finally vocabulary. Ken, you're in the first position. Please make a selection.
I've never said this on TV. Chicks dig me for 200, please, Jimmy.
Kathleen Kenyon's excavation of this city, mentioned in Joshua, showed the walls had been repaired 17 times. Watson.
What is Jericho?
Correct.
400, same category.
This mystery author and her archaeologist hubby dug in hopes of finding the lost Syrian city of Urkesh. Watson?
Who is Agatha Christie?
Correct.
If you don't know this game, it's Jeopardy. Watson is the IBM computer. It's an artificial intelligence machine. It's actually a really good speech recognizer and an incredible search engine with some logic in there. It is now being used in the medical industry to give better diagnosis than a human being. When we think about communication, all I hear is watching TV, downloading things. Actually, there is now more communication between machines on this planet than human beings by a long way. They are the dominant communicators, and they're not asymmetric, they're symmetric. You have to think of a world not too far away of you and I accessing that power, not because we're carrying it because it's too big, but because it's available as part of the cloud, because it's not just asking a database locally, it's actually accessing all the data on the planet that's available. That's where we're headed. That's why we need an awful lot of bandwidth. So is there much more to come? Oh yes, it's almost infinite. Robots are already going into home use in the Southeast Asian area. In industry, they're manufacturing everything. I really just don't get why there's a problem making an economic case for fiber to the home and to the office and to everywhere else. I've not seen any forecast that said, uh-oh, demand for bandwidth, demand for the internet is going to downturn. It's accelerating. The gap between what is and what could be is huge. And people talk about trying to find the market opportunity. I don't know how it could be bigger, bolder, and plainer. It's there. We have to get out there and just do it. But we need to think differently. And there are some exemplar countries from which we can learn. And I'm going to feature one for you in a moment, which is a UK telco, not very big, on the island of Jersey, where they've abandoned all the telco thinking and they're dynamically changing the entire company. So here are the biggest challenges. The old mindsets are the worst, and the vested interests. They have to go, and 2 years ago, on this island, it started to happen. Here are the headlines. 1 gigabit, both directions, at once, for every home and office. 100% ducted cable, no overhead. Wi-Fi and 3G on every terminal. Where are they? All the companies have been completed. The rollout to the home has begun. Let's just have a look at a few specifics, because there's some interesting things here. Don't fiber from the core of the network out, fiber from the periphery in. Why? At the core of the network, people have got bandwidth. On the periphery, they haven't. At the core of the network, people haven't got any money. On the periphery, they have. Go for the high net worths. Go for the housing clusters. Best of all, encourage self-install. In my old home, I had 8 optical fibers, and the reason was my sons and I put it in ourselves. It's not that difficult. You can also encourage community action. You can quickly assemble a geek squad with the capability of installing and maintaining this stuff. But do extraordinary things, like 100% Ethernet, only one next generation network for everything, point-to-point fiber, office-grade equipment, mobile only. Give people SIP phones if they need them, but for goodness sake, close down the PSTN and all that MPLS stuff. It's like maintaining a Morse key. Why would you try and keep alive something that went out in the middle of the last century, let alone this one? Best of all, open up access on 3G to everybody. Your competitors, let them use it, charge them for the privilege. Open access Wi-Fi. Why do people put passwords on Wi-Fi? Isn't it weird? Have you worked out the cost of Wi-Fi? My hotel does not charge me for that bottle of shampoo in my bedroom, but that costs more than the Wi-Fi connection in my bedroom. Isn't it weird? I have interesting discussions with hotel managers, by the way. It's best if we guard the fiber connection, but if we leave the RG45, the LAN connectors wide open in an office block or in a housing block, switch on Wi-Fi, switch on 3G, and everybody's got access, you come back 2 months later and every slot has got a plug in it because they wire it up themselves. Well, you would, wouldn't you? You couldn't resist. There's an island-wide vision, and this is it. The vision is to be able to go anywhere and to get access. Something that telecoms industry and the pundits do not get. More wireless equals more fiber. It absolutely does. I'll give you an example of something that terrifies mobile operators. It is coffee. Coffee is the biggest strange attractor in a chaotic sense on the planet. Here we are. Looks to me like there are about 2,000 people. In about 10 minutes, we're going to go for coffee. At that point, 500 mobile phones are going to come out and the network's going to collapse. How can we cure that as an industry? Very simple. We need hundreds of hotspots in this building that work over ranges of 10 to 20 meters, rather than working over 1 to 10 kilometers. The key thing about the success of any company, telco in particular, or netco, is that they've got to migrate the business model to new services. Being a host pipe for bits is not going to provide you with a lot of money. So let's just have a look of what's just over that horizon. Is there more? Absolutely there is. This sort of terrifies people when I point it out. But I can see from your mobile phone, whether you're sitting down, walking, on a train, in a car, I can see you stop at traffic lights, accelerate away. If you go around a traffic island, or rotary, if you're an American, you can see. Why? Because it's got accelerometers, because there is G-force being registered, because that information is embedded in there. But think of the other things. Your mobile phone knows where you are. It knows where you've been. It knows where you're going to. It knows who you talk to, who you text, who calls you. That's sort of interesting stuff. The future of the industry, the future of our species, lies in this stuff, the metadata of life. We're now at an interesting epoch. There is so much information available that I will pay you to tell me where something is that I'm looking for. Kind of interesting turnaround. There's information in data, but there's even more information in the metadata and the metadata of our lives. When I look at the way people do economic analysis now, I get kind of astonished. I don't know how to say this any plainer. It is so simple-minded and so dumb, it's unbelievable. Even as a student, I did whole life costing, net present value, all of those kinds of things. They seem to have fallen off the table, and economic decisions now seem to be made on one simple parameter, upfront costing. The cost of ownership is by far the most important parameter that we should be looking at. Fibre to the home reduces the cost of ownership, increases the opportunity for new business like no technology we ever saw before. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I've got us back on time, and we're almost ready for coffee. Thank you very much indeed.